Hello there, it's Dr. Driver. I'm going to talk to you now about these three stories assigned from Mallory, and we'll either do the end in class or I may get to filming another one. But anyway, get a look at this, please. The first book of Mallory's Morte Arthur describes Merlin the magician and the unwholesome and crazy lust, really, by Uther Pendragon, who's the father of Arthur and king of the land, for Arthur's mother, Igraine. And Igraine is actually married. She's married to someone else. Her husband's name is Gorlois, though that's not mentioned in this text that you have in Vinaver. Anyway, the king is very interested in the lady. She is not interested in him. She is married, and they're at the king's castle, and the king is liking and loving this lady well, says Mallory. Anyway, she doesn't like this, so she tells her husband they have to leave. And so they go away, and as soon as Uther is aware that they've departed, then he commands them to come back, and of course they don't. And Gorlois goes into one castle and puts his wife, Igraine, into the other one called Tintagel, and there's still a place called Tintagel with ruins in it in Britain. And then Uther lays siege to the castles because he wants the woman. And then Uther is so impassioned by his lust for fair Igraine that he falls sick, and Merlin, the magician, is called upon, and Merlin is asked by Uther to do what he can to allow him to have the woman. So, and Merlin practices magic, which is interesting, but there's a mixture of Christian imagery with ideas about sorcery. On page 5, if you have your Vinaver, Uther will swear upon the 4 evangelists, who are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the gospel writers, that he will keep his word with Merlin, who's a magician. Anyway, what happens is that Merlin conceals or disguises Uther as Gorlois. Gorlois is out at battle. Gorlois is killed. Uther, meanwhile, rides to the castle and has sex with Igraine, and then Arthur is conceived. She has children with Gorlois, one of whom is Morgan Le Fay. So Morgan Le Fay is Arthur's half-sister. So after the death of the Duke, King Uther lay with Igraine more than 3 hours after his death and begat on her that night Arthur. And so then this is a kind of tainted birth of Arthur, which could be seen to color all the later actions of England's greatest king, or perhaps to doom his ideal kingdom in some way. There's also echoes of the King David story in the Bible. King David lusts after the woman, the married woman Bathsheba, and sends Uriah to the front of the battle and seduces her, and marries her eventually after Uriah is killed, but he seduces her while Uriah is in battle. And the film Excalibur shows this rather graphically if you're interested. Anyway, Uther then proposes to Igraine pretty promptly after the death of Gorlois, and she accepts him. And then we're given a little genealogy of the other people that get married along with them. Lot marries Morgause, who's the mother of Gawain, and someone named King Nentras marries Elaine. There are a lot of women in the Arthur legends named Elaine. And then there's a third sister. These are all the sisters. Morgan Le Fay is put to school in a nunnery. And here's another weird mixture. Morgan Le Fay was put to school in a nunnery, and there she learned so much that she was a great clerk of necromancy, or black magic. So she's learning black magic in the convent school. And after she was wedded to King Uriens of the land of Gore. And in other Arthur legends, the land of Gore is the land of the dead. So, interesting. Anyway, Merlin has this deal with Uther that he will take the baby after it's born. And this is what happens. This is a scene from Excalibur again, where Uther comes to take the baby Arthur from Igraine to be raised up by Merlin. So Merlin takes the baby, given him by Uther, and gives him to Sir Ector to raise with Sir Kay as Arthur's brother. So Sir Kay becomes Arthur's brother, but he's actually just his foster brother. And then before Uther dies, and he dies in battle, actually he's sick before, but he's carried off to battle, and he says that his son Arthur will be king after him. So he has the king's dying voice, which you may remember from Hamlet. Hamlet is unable to have his father's dying voice because he's murdered before Hamlet is able to come to be crowned. So the dying voice of the king was very important in predicting who would be the next king. So Merlin says to Uther as he's dying, "Sir, shall your son Arthur be king after your days of this realm with all the appurtenances?" And Uther agrees. Okay, so he gives Arthur his dying voice. And then stood the realm in great jeopardy, we're told, because it has no king. So the realm, there's civil war, basically, that breaks out. Merlin then goes to the Archbishop of Canterbury and asks him to gather all the noblemen in London during Christmas. They all turn up, and during Mass, suddenly in the churchyard, a great marble stone appears. And in the midst thereof was like an anvil of steel a foot on high, and therein stuck a fair sword, naked by the point. I'm on page 9 of the text. And letters there were written in gold about the sword that said, "Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king, born of all England." So this thing just kind of here's a picture of Morgan, who is Arthur's half-sister, who will learn sorcery. Here, this is a pre-Raphaelite painting. And here's the sword in the stone. Well, it's actually the sword in the anvil in the stone. From the cartoon version, the sword in the stone. We get this story. It miraculously appears. And then after church on New Year's Day, a tournament is arranged, and Sir Ector and Sir Kay ride off to the jousts, to the tournaments, accompanied by the young Arthur as their squire. Kay forgets his sword, and Arthur rushes home to retrieve it. But when he gets home, there's no one there. They've all gone off to the tournament. So Arthur rushes into the churchyard and takes the sword from the stone to his brother Sir Kay. When Kay sees the sword, he claims that he found it. He drew it out. But his father, who seems to know Sir Kay pretty well, takes the two young men back to the churchyard and makes Kay swear upon the book, the Bible, that he will truly tell how he has acquired the sword. Kay then reveals that Arthur has pulled the sword from the stone, and there's a business of Arthur's putting this sword back in the stone and pulling it out, and nobody else can pull it out. And then Ector and Kay kneel down to the earth, says Mallory, in a very sweet scene. And Arthur asks why they are kneeling to him. This is on page 11. "Alas, my own dear father and brother, why kneel ye to me?" Arthur is then upset to learn that Ector is not his real father, and agrees to make Sir Kay seneschal of all his lands. A seneschal is a steward, and this post must have been very prestigious and financially rewarding. So Kay is not the most virtuous guy. He appears in lots of Arthur legends, and he's really kind of a creep, but he's always the seneschal because he's Arthur's half-brother. Then Mallory describes how all the knights come to take the sword from the stone, because no one believes that this young man could do it. And so Arthur's called upon many times to take the sword from the stone in public, and he does it again. And then finally at Pentecost, and the Arthurian legends are based sort of on around church holidays at Pentecost, which is the day that the apostles, I think, are able to speak all of these languages through the grace of God. The people are witnessing the people of the realm are witnessing this, and they finally proclaim Arthur as king. "We will have Arthur unto our king. We will put him no more in delay, for we all see it is God's will that he shall be our king, and he who holdeth against it, we will slay him." So that's pretty clear. The chapter then concludes with a description of how Arthur sets up his government and who he conquers, ending with the mention of the Round Table. And if you look at the note on page 13, you will learn that the Round Table originally belonged to Arthur's father, King Uther, who gave it as a gift to the father of Guinevere, who apparently is also Roman, but that comes out of Geoffrey of Monmouth, actually, not Mallory, as far as I remember. Anyway, when Arthur marries Guinevere, it's sent back to Uther as part of Guinevere's dowry. So that's the Merlin story that we've got in Vinaver. Moving on now to Knight of the Cart. It's an important story. It's set in May, in the springtime, and it contains at the beginning an interesting and important meditation on the nature of love. Mallory says that in spring, one's thoughts turn to ideas of love, and more specifically this on page 51. For like as trees and herbs bourgeoneth and flourisheth in May, and likewise every lusty heart that is any manner of lovers springeth, bourgeoneth, buddeth, and flourisheth in lusty deeds. So spring inspires us to do great deeds. In spring, he says, people are renewed like plants, and lovers recall their courtesy, nobility, and the service they may have forgotten. And of course, in the Middle Ages, the service was supposed to be to God, your Lord, and your lady, though sometimes that order is changed. Mallory then talks about instability. For like as winter rasure doth always erase and deface green summer, so fareth it by unstable love in man and woman. For in many persons there is no stability. Okay, so people are fickle. They don't stay in love long. And he goes on to say that love in the old days was not so. Right. Where is this? Yes, he actually goes on to talk about how one must honor God, and then the quarrel should come of thy lady. And then on page 52, he says, nowadays, men cannot love 7 nights, that's a week, but they must have all their desires. That love may not endure by reason, for where they been soon accorded, or agreed, and hasty, heat soon cooleth, and right so fareth the love nowadays, soon hot, soon cold. Okay, this is no stability, says Mallory. So he's writing in the 15th century. Apparently people were fickle and had fleeting affections even then. But here he goes on and he says, but the old love was not so, for men and women could love together 7 years, and no lecherous lust was betwixt them. And then was love truth and faithfulness, and so and likewise was used such love in King Arthur's days. So in the old days, love lasted a long time, and they could love together. Men and women could love each other for 7 years without overwhelming desire. So he then also talks a little bit about how life in the old world was ideal. So I don't know. Was love ever like this? I don't know. For men and women could love together 7 years, and no lecherous lust was betwixt them. And then was love, truth, and faithfulness, and so on likewise was used such love in King Arthur's days. Mallory then asks all lovers to remember the month of May, and rather surprisingly describes Queen Guinevere like this, quote, while she lived, she was a true lover, and therefore she had a good end. Now you may recall, if you know anything about the Arthur legends, that Guinevere and Lancelot have a long romance, and Guinevere is the queen of King Arthur. So that's a problem, and that's a problem in the story. It's a conflict. But Mallory describes her as a true lover. She certainly always loves Gwen. She always loves Lancelot. Arthur is an arranged marriage. She's not too keen about him, but Lancelot is her true lover, and he loves her truly too, even though Arthur is his king. That's the problem. Okay, so the story goes on. Guinevere is out hunting in May with her retinue of men who are clothed all in green because they're hunting. They're not wearing armor. They're wearing hunting gear, and they're not prepared for battle. She brings 10 men and 10 ladies with her. And this is a charming scene where she describes them all bedashed with herbs, mosses, and flowers. So it's almost like the scene in the musical Camelot, where Guinevere is running around uh, with kind of flower garlands and flowers around their necks. It's all very 1960s sort of, except it's really old, much older than that. But then there's a wicked character named Meleagance, who has long loved the queen, and he attacks her men, who are called the queen's knights, in an unfair battle, because his men have weaponry and armor, and he kidnaps the queen. Guinevere then sends a message to Lancelot through a child, or a messenger, who comes to the forest where the queen's knights have done battle with Sir Meleagance and his men. So Lancelot is riding to rescue Guinevere, as he does throughout the King Arthur legends. So he's riding along, trying to rescue Guinevere, having gotten this message from the child or youth. Actually doesn't tell you what the gender of the child is, a messenger from Guinevere. Note, she doesn't ask Arthur, she asks Lancelot. Anyway, Meleagance is evil, and he's posted 30 archers there who kill Lancelot's horse, which is not very nice. And the poor horse is staggering along, and he's described in rather great detail, staggering along with all these arrows on him before he dies. Lancelot then encounters two carters in the wood, and they're very rude to him. One of them won't give Lancelot a ride, so Lancelot dispatches him pretty promptly. Say me, carter, said Sir Lancelot, what shall I give thee to suffer me to leap into thy chariot, and that thou will bring me unto a castle within this 2 mile? Thou shalt not enter this chariot, said the carter, for I am sent for to fetch wood. Unto whom? Said Sir Lancelot. Unto my lord, Sir Meleagance, said the carter. And with him would I speak, said Sir Lancelot. Thou shalt not go with me, said the carter. When Sir Lancelot leapt to him and gave him backward with his gauntlet, his glove, obviously his armored glove, a rear main, a hit, that he fell to the earth stark dead. Then the other carter, his fellow, was afeard and weened to have gone the same way. And then he said, Fair lord, save my life, and I shall bring thee where ye will. So, the real disrespect for people, working people in these stories. The poor carter just wants to get away from Lancelot, doesn't want to give him a ride to Meleagance's house. Anyway, the other carter is then terrorized into giving Lancelot a ride to the castle of Sir Meleagance in his cart. And traditionally, people were only carried in carts when they were condemned criminals on their way to prison or the gallows, on their way to hanging. So this is seen as a great humiliation of the mighty and noble Lancelot, which he is willing to undertake for his love, Guinevere. And so Lancelot's coming along in the cart, and this is actually in the Vinaver edition. This is a reproduction. You see those 2 ladies at the window. They're very blurry. It's not a very good woodcut. She sees Lancelot in the cart, and she says, Ah, see, madam, where rideth in a chariot a goodly armed knight, and we suppose he rideth unto hanging. And then Guinevere is so humiliated by this that she's going to refuse to speak to Lancelot because he's dishonored himself by riding in a cart. Anyway, Lancelot then enters the castle of Meleagance and slays the porter at the gate with his mighty gauntlet. He's got this metal glove that's pretty ferocious. The text tells us his neck brast in 2 pieces, so he breaks the guy's neck with his glove. There's a fair amount of violence in Malory, which for some reason I don't mind. I don't know why. Anyway, Meleagance is such a coward that once he knows Lancelot is on the premises, he rushes to Guinevere and begs her pardon, and she gives him a hard time. He says, I hope you can make things better between me and Lancelot. And she gives him she basically says to him, What aileth you now? I might well wit that some good knight would revenge me, though my lord King Arthur knew not of this your work. Ah, madam, said Sir Meleagance, all this that is amiss on my party shall be amended right as yourself will devise, and wholly I put myself in your grace. So he's basically a coward as well. And then Guinevere confronts Lancelot. She gives him a hard time, and I have to say, throughout the Morte Arthur, these two, the 2 great lovers, are always fighting about something. It's one of those kinds of passions, I guess, is fueled by argument. Not for me, but some people kind of enjoy that. She talks to Lancelot and tells him, well, she has a couple things to say to him. So she goes down there and she says to him, "Why are you so angry, Lancelot?" And Lancelot says, "Why are you asking me that question?" He says, "Oh, you got more reason to be angry than I am. And the only thing that's hurt me is the slaying of my horse." And she says, "Well, you have to behave better. You must come in with me peaceably, for all thing is put in my hand, and all that is amiss shall be amended. For the knight full sore repenteth him of his misadventure that is befallen him." And Lancelot says, "Oh, madam, sith it is so that you be accorded with him. As for me, I may not again say it, howbeit Sir Meliagance hath done full shamefully to me and cowardly. And madam, and I had wist ye had been so lately accorded with him, I would have not made such haste unto you." So he's basically telling her there, "Oh, I see you made a deal with him. So I wouldn't have rushed here if I'd known it would be that easy for you to have power over him, really." Anyway, they're kind of quarreling, and then finally they stop. Yeah, and then we learn that this is why later Lancelot is called the Knight of the Cart. In French, le Chevalier de Chariot, and turn me to this tale. Okay, then we shift to this adventure that occurs at the castle of Meliagance. This is on page 61. Guinevere has moved all the wounded knights, all of her knights that were with her out maying, collecting flowers and things in the forest. She's moved them close to her bedroom so she could nurse them. Lancelot visits Guinevere at night in her bedchamber, climbing a ladder up to her window, where they have a fairly odd conversation about wanting to be together. Lancelot then proves his love for the queen by bending the iron bars on her window with his bare hands, cutting his hand in the process. They then go to bed, where they make love until dawn. So he's cut his hand, and they make love, and he doesn't notice his hurt hand until the dawning of the day. And then when he can tarry no longer, he goes out the window and down this ladder back to his own bed. So it's all very heroic and complicated. And then Lavaine, who is with Lancelot, notices the cut hand, and so he dresses Lancelot's hand and puts a glove on it. And then Mallory says, rather matter-of-factly, "Everyone sleeps until 9 o'clock a.m. Meliagance then enters the queen's chamber, which is very bad behavior. Men are not supposed to be going into women's bedrooms. It's overfamiliar. We recognize this in a way in Pandarus's overfamiliar behavior with Cressade in the Troilus. Meliagance notices there's blood all over the bed. This is on page 63. The head sheet, pillow, and oversheet were bebled of the blood of Sir Lancelot. And so he thinks that she's been having sex with the wounded knights, and he accuses her of that. The bloody bed is shown to one and all, and Lancelot points out first Meliagance has no business being in the queen's bedroom, and then he offers trial by combat. Trial by combat, like trial by ordeal, were two ways in the Middle Ages to solve something, to solve a legal issue. These actually were on the books, the law books. It goes back to Anglo-Saxon law. So if you have a trial by combat, the person who wins is obviously in the right because God has favored that person. So they exchange gloves, and the challenges are written down, and everything's sealed with signets. Mallory's really good on the legal details of this. Then Meliagance, rather casually, asks Lancelot if he would like to take a little tour of his castle. By the way, Lancelot, would you like to tour the castle? So, as he's showing Lancelot the castle, Lancelot falls down a trapdoor into a cell beneath the floor. This is on page 65. Meliagance then pretends he does not know what has happened to Lancelot, who apparently is in the habit of going off to do various things without informing anyone. So Lancelot is now imprisoned in the cave beneath the castle. Each day a young and beautiful lady brings him food and drink and tries to seduce him, but Lancelot keeps turning her down. She keeps talking to Lancelot, keeps saying Lancelot, Guinevere was going to be burnt at the stake for treason if he doesn't show up to be her champion in battle. And then Lancelot, he keeps saying, well, maybe tomorrow, or another time, or he keeps kind of putting her off. And then finally he says to her point blank, if there were no more women in all this land but ye, yet shall I not have ado with you. So if you're the last woman living, you could just still forget it. Okay, then the lady says that she will bring all of Lancelot's armor and get him a horse if he just kisses her, which he does consent to do at page 67. He says, just kissing him won't cause him to lose his honor. As for to kiss you, I may do that and lose no worship. Worship means honor in Middle English, and Mallory uses worship to mean honor all the way through the book. Back at Westminster, Guinevere's at the stake, and the armed knights and King Arthur are waiting for her champion to show up. Lavaine offers to serve in Lancelot's place, and just as he is riding from the end of the tournament field, or the list, Lancelot appears and beats Meleagant first in the tournament, knocks him off his horse, then fights him with one hand tied behind his back. And you thought that was a cliche, but it's really on page 69. It's very old. So, I will let bind my left hand behind me there, and shall not help me, and right so, I shall do battle with you, says Lancelot to Meleagant. So I can fight him with my hand, one hand tied behind my back. Finally, Lancelot hits Meleagant on the helmet so that, quote, the stroke carved the head in two parties. That is, the blow slices the knight's head in two. Yuck. The story ends by explaining that according to the French book, or Mallory's French manuscript source, Lancelot was so annoyed that all the knights and ladies had insulted him by assuming he was a criminal in the cart, that he fought for 1 year from the cart rather than on horseback. So that's the end of that story. Interesting. Okay, moving right along here. We're coming to the Fair Maid of Astolat. The Fair Maid's other name is Elaine LeBlanc, and Tennyson will write this story in the 19th century. Alfred Lord Tennyson, in his Idylls of the King, he will call her the Lady of Shalott. So what happens in this story? So Lancelot and Guinevere are fighting, and they kind of both want to stay behind as Arthur goes off for a tournament, but then they think it looks bad. And then Lancelot leaves and he disguises himself, so nobody will know who he is. And he rides off in disguise to this tournament after Guinevere basically tells him off for wanting to be with her instead, because it's not honorable. And also, who knows what they had in mind. So Lancelot goes to stay with Sir Bernard and his son, Sir Lavaine. And the minute the fair maid, Elaine, lays eyes on Lancelot, she loves him. This is on page 131. Quote, and ever she beheld Sir Lancelot wonderfully. That means with admiration. And as the book saith, she cast such a love unto Sir Lancelot that she could never withdraw her love, wherefore she died. Lancelot agrees to wear her red sleeve as a token of his admiration on his helmet, but this is actually just a disguise. Now this seems a bit odd, but ladies gave men who had won their favorite sleeves. Your sleeves in the Middle Ages, sleeves were sewn onto the dress. Your sleeves were often sewn on, and they were often the only part of the dress that was washed. But the sleeve would be sewn on and then taken off at night, or taken off the dress. So she gives him her sleeve. I mean, you usually see it in films with a kerchief or something. Now, she thinks that he's taking it to show his esteem for her. He's actually taking it to disguise himself because he's never taken a token from any other woman but Guinevere. Anyway, Lancelot goes out onto the field and he fights all the knights of the Round Table. But this isn't really fighting to the death. This is like football. It's like a sport. So then Lancelot is wounded by his cousin, Sir Bors, who doesn't recognize him, and he's taken off to a hermit to be healed. Meanwhile, Sir Gawain, another knight of Arthur's court, visits Sir Bernard looking for the mystery knight, and Elaine shows Gawain Lancelot's shield. And there's a very funny moment here where Elaine invites this, who's very young, she seems like a very young girl. She invites Sir Gawain up to her bedroom, and her father says, oh no, you don't. Where is this? Yes, Gawain says to her, is that good knight your love? Certainly, sir, she said, he is my love. Then know ye his name, said Sir Gawain. Nay, truly, sir, said the damsel, I know not his name, neither from whence he came, but to say that I love him, I promise God and you I love him. So she loves him. She doesn't know his name, but she loves him. And then she says that she will show the shield that's in her chamber, in her bedchamber, that Lancelot has left there. Ah, fair damsel, said Sir Gawain, please it you let me have a sight of that shield? Sir, she said, it is in my chamber, covered with a case, and if you will come with me, you will see it. Not so, said Sir Bernard to his daughter, but send ye for that shield. So that kind of shows her innocence, I think. Elaine then seeks Lancelot to help heal him, and of course, in the Middle Ages, women were healers. They were responsible for the healing in their households and sometimes in their estates. Meanwhile, having seen the shield, Gawain knows the knight is Lancelot, and Gawain returns to the court and explains that Lancelot was the one fighting against the knights, and then the queen gets very upset. In fact, she gets so upset, Mallory describes her as well nigh out of her mind for wrath. This is on page 142, so she's jealous and angry. Elaine, meanwhile, travels around by herself, interestingly, and goes to the hermit, finds Lancelot at the hermit's, and then tells Lancelot he's been recognized, and Lancelot is very worried about what the queen is going to say about this, what Guinevere will say. Then Sir Lancelot compassed in his mind that Sir Gawain would tell Sir Guinevere how he bare the red sleeve and for whom. That he wist well would turn into great anger. And then Elaine apparently sits by Lancelot day and night and heals him of his wounds, mostly. And then Sir Bors is riding around, another knight of Arthur's court, and finds Lancelot in the hermitage and talks to Lancelot about Elaine. Like, why don't you just get involved with her, Lancelot? Why don't you just forget about the queen? So they have this whole conversation about why he can't love Elaine. Lancelot says to Bors, then is the queen wroth, therefore am I right heavy, because I deserve no wrath. And then Bors says, all was in vain, for she said more largelier to me than I to you say now. He says, is this she that is so busy about you, that men call the fair maid of Astolat? And Lancelot says, it is, and I can't get rid of her, that by no means I cannot put her from me. Why would you put her from you, says Sir Bors, for she is a passing fair damsel, and well beseen and well taught. And God would, fair cousin, that you could love her. But as to that, I may neither dare nor not counsel you, but I see well by her diligence about you that she loveth you entirely. That me repenteth, said Sir Lancelot. I repent for that. I don't want her to love me. And then Bors says, she's not the first that have lost her paid upon you, and that is more the pity. So Elaine is obviously an attractive young girl who is devoted to Lancelot, but Lancelot only has eyes for the queen. After several other episodes, Sir Lavaine, his sister, and Elaine, and Lancelot return to Astolat, where we get this scene of Elaine proposing to Lancelot. So he's about to leave, he's about to go back to the court, and Lancelot and she are speaking, and she says, this is on 150, Sir, I would have you to my husband, said Elaine. Fair damsel, I thank you heartily, said Sir Lancelot, but truly, he said, I cast me never to be a wedded man. Then, fair knight, said she, will you be my paramour? Will you be my lover? Jesu, defend me, said Sir Lancelot, for then I rewarded your father and your brother full evil for their great goodness. Alas, then, said she, I must die for your love. And he says, well, you don't have to die for my love. I can help you get married to a gentleman. I'll give you £1,000 yearly. So he's trying to buy her off, really. I will give you this much for your kindness, and always I will live to be your own knight. So he says he will serve her, but he cannot be her lover. He cannot be her husband. Then Lancelot returns to the court, and Guinevere won't speak to Lancelot. And poor old Elaine, the fair maid, shrieks and faints, and then she just stops eating, basically. She makes such sorrow, we're told, on 152, day and night, that she never slept, ate, neither drunk, and ever she made her complaint unto Sir Lancelot. She lives for about 10 days. The priest comes, her ghostly father, and says, "You should forget about Lancelot." And she says, quite directly, "Why should I leave such thoughts? Am I not an earthly woman? And all the while the breath is in my body, I may complain me. For my belief is that I do none offense, though I love an earthly man unto God, for he formed me thereunto. And all manner of good love cometh of God. And other than good love, loved I never Sir Lancelot du Lac." He's the only one I've ever loved. "And I take God to record, I loved never none but him, nor never shall of earthly creature, and a clean maiden I am for him, and for all other." Okay, so she says that she's just going to die now. And she calls her father, Sir Bernard, and her brothers, and she asks her brother to write a letter for her that she will dictate. "And while my body is hot, let this letter be put in my right hand, and my hand bound fast with the letter until that I be cold. And let me be put in a fair bed with all the richest clothes I have about me. And so let my bed and all my richest clothes be laid with me in a chariot unto the next place where the Thames is. And there let me be put into a boat, and but one man with me, such as you trust to steer me thither, and that my barget be covered with black samite over and over." So they do this. They put her on a boat. They put her final letter to Lancelot in her hand. She dies, and a man steers the boat down the Thames until it comes to the court of Arthur. Okay, so here's the boat, and here's the finding of the boat. So they're looking out the window, Arthur and Guinevere, they see the boat, they all go down to the river. This is on 153. "They found the fairest corpse lying in a rich bed that ever ye saw, and a poor man sitting at the barget's end, and no word would he speak." And they get the letter, and they read the letter aloud, and this is what the letter says. "Most noble knight, my lord Sir Lancelot, now hath death made us two at debate for your love. And I was your lover that men called the fair maid of Astolat. Therefore thereto unto all ladies I make my moan. Yet for my soul ye pray, and bury me at the least, and offer ye my mass penny. This is my last request. And a clean maiden I died, a virgin I died. I take God to witness, and I pray for my soul, Sir Lancelot, as thou art peerless." And all of them weep, the king, the queen, all the knights wept for pity of the doleful complaints. And when Lancelot heard it read, he says he's very sad about it. And she was both fair and good, but she loved me out of measure, he says. And then Guinevere can't stop. She chastises him. She says, after all the jealousy and anger, she says, "Sir," this is Guinevere, "Sir, you might have showed her some bounty and gentleness, which might have preserved her life." And Lancelot said, "She wouldn't take no for an answer, and I offered her all kinds of things." And he says to Guinevere, "I love not to be constrained to love." You can't make someone love someone else. "For love must arise only of the heart's self, and not by none constraint." So that is the end of the Fair Maid of Astolat.